Hello and welcome to our presentation. This will be a cybersecurity risk assessment, and we are Group 1, and our assigned country is the United States. In this presentation, we will discuss various topics. We understand that there has been a breach detected in one of our systems, and this presentation will talk about different attack vectors, attribution analysis, provide examples of potential vulnerabilities, discuss a little bit further about authentication, authorization, and access control. We will also discuss weaknesses through people, technology, and policy, and we will provide recommendations as well as a conclusion. First, we're going to talk about attack vectors. So we understand that there has been some type of breach detected. In order for us to identify how the breach occurred and who was responsible for this breach, we're going to take a look at attack vectors. So attack vectors are paths which threat actors use to obtain unauthorized access, right? So they're different paths that are created through vulnerabilities, and attackers use those paths to break into systems. This can come from different areas, which means paths can come from flaws in hardware, information system software, operating systems, telecommunication, as well as human factors. First, we're going to talk about hardware. So hardware could be attackers exploiting flaws in hardware, and by doing so, they can input some type of malicious devices onto different towers, servers, peripheral devices. They can also create backdoors, physically install USBs onto computers, devices. They can also conduct Trojan attacks, IP piracy, tampering, and they all could be used as avenues to conduct different attacks. The next attack vector would be through information system software. So again, this will be flaws within those within system software, and attack vectors could be poor encryption, software misconfiguration, out-of-date software with vulnerabilities, malware, software injections. In addition to that, operating systems can include the insertion of viruses, worms through weak points of the OS. They can install bugs, buffer overflow, unpatched OS, and attack on network protocols. So there's different types of attacks that can occur through these different areas. Next, we're going to talk about attack vectors through telecommunications as well as human factors. To start, users can be manipulated, deceived, or threatened to download or click on untrusted sources. This allows attackers to enter systems and infiltrate their malware, viruses, or conduct SQL injections for malicious purposes. Attack vectors through telecommunications can include email attachments, compromised web pages, online advertisements, messages, as well as social engineering attempts. Also, fake web pages can also be attack vectors that can have malicious coding or malware that can lead into more serious attacks, such as DDoS attacks, infiltrate some dormant bugs, or conduct botnet attacks through the networks. Next, we're going to look at human factors. So users are a key part of keeping technological assets safe. If they're not trained properly of how to detect, prevent, or report potential cyber attacks, then threat actors can use human error as attack vectors as part of gaining access to systems. This can include weak or compromised credentials, insider threats, untrained users, brute force attacks, key logging attacks, credential stuffing, and as well as have password cracking software that can easily discover weak passwords or weak credential systems. Next, we're going to look into attribution. So again, as we understand potential attack vectors, we must also look into attributions in order to discover the identity of the potential attacker. In the previous step, in project number 1, IP addresses were provided that were associated with the unregulated activity going on in the systems. So it was discovered that countries like Russia, China, New Zealand, and Netherlands were listed as a point of origin from these IP addresses. Based on this information, the process of tracking and identifying the trackers can be discovered due to the country's general style of conducting cyber attacks. So first, we're going to look into Russia. So Russia is known for their state actors, hacktivists, and bad actors. Russia has the Russian mafia, which are a large group that is known to conduct cyber attacks. They encourage cyber attacks when they do occur. And usually they're educated citizens or other government adversaries that conduct these type of attacks. And the Russian government is known to fund these cyber attackers. Instead of punishing the individuals or the groups or the organizations, they actually incentivize individuals for conducting cyber attacks. So based on that information, the Russians are highly known for being behind or being part of encouraging and funding some of the cyber attackers. Another country that was discovered was China. China is also a government that believes in cyber attacks, and they believe it's a good thing. They believe in surveilling its own citizens, allies, and competitors in order to move ahead. So as we know that general style of them, it's important that for our systems, we must protect physical devices and scan for any type of foreign objects. Hardware and peripherals must also be checked for any physical damages, any type of foreign objects or bugs that may be recording without any type of authorization. So eavesdropping devices or any type of monitoring or surveillance, that's something that we must take a specific precaution to see if there's any to protect the systems, and if that is discovered that there was some type of surveillance going on or eavesdropping, then more than likely that is the general style that the Chinese government has.
It is stated that both New Zealand and Netherlands are also believed to be allies to the United States and share similarities about fighting cybercrime. However, mitigation factors to protect systems must also be in place. For example, systems must be protected with multi-authentication requirements, up-to-date software, restricting downloads, or alternating systems without a verification process. Ensuring that proper protection against attacks can assist in mitigating cyber attacks.
Next, we are going to talk about vulnerabilities. So as we establish the potential attack vectors and potential identity of an attacker, we must conduct our own internal vulnerability assessment to see what weak points may have been exploited in the breach of our systems. First, we're going to establish potential vulnerabilities in infrastructure. So, for example, potential vulnerabilities in infrastructure includes weaknesses in physical buildings, land, unguarded assets, or any type of outer perimeter that may be weak or need some type of reinforcement. Potential threats that may be associated to these outer perimeters include natural disasters such as fires, earthquakes, or hurricanes, as well as human threats, which can be foreign adversaries that they may harm infrastructure. So foreign adversaries may have can potentially enter the buildings or cause physical damages to buildings or infrastructure or different lands. This is an external threat that can occur. There are laws and that are specifically talk about how to reinforce and what's the standards for keeping such buildings safe. Again, an attack vector can be weak physical security, open concepts of this territory, and as well as unguarded territory. There may be a possibility that threat actors can physically enter in the building and take equipment after a natural disaster, or even just take equipment or breach into devices. This would be like impact level would be medium. Ways to mitigate potential vulnerabilities would be to ensure that insurance is purchased to cover any type of monetary loss in the event of natural disasters, ensure that there are preventive measures in place in the event of fires, earthquakes, or hurricanes. In addition, if buildings or natural or if infrastructure is placed in overseas, make sure that there's a peace treaty with that particular government and not in a physical hostile environment. Next, we're going to talk about vulnerabilities in communication systems. So there may be potential vulnerabilities in devices, left and exposed elements, unprotected communication systems such as tower lines, communication towers, network connectivity, satellites, and this is external. This will be categorized as an external threat. And threats. Examples of threats include potential adversary governments, power outages, chemical spills, natural disasters, environmental threats such as biological or nuclear or issues, as well as a power failure. Technology attacks by bad actors can potentially also be a threat, which can disrupt the connectivity of servers and networks. Threat actors such as black hackers, criminals, or politically motivated attackers can exploit these type of vulnerabilities. Again, these are the specific standards that have been published in order to mitigate or standardize the way of how to handle potential vulnerabilities in connection systems. Attack vectors can occur in hardware. There could be manufacturing of backdoors, physical installation of malicious USB with viruses, eavesdropping devices, side channel attacks. They can all be used as avenues to conduct an attack. Such attacks can result in hardware cloning, breaking devices, unlocking these devices, generating a ticking time bomb, or a kill switch to crash systems and devices. The type of level of impact that this could be a medium in the event that this does occur. Mitigation factors include ensuring that communication towers are built with strong foundation. Test them to see how they stand with natural disasters. Also, in the event of a power outage, ensure that there are backup generators to the power towers. There should also be a recovery plan and a team that handles response in the event that this does occur. Security around equipment to ensure that no unauthorized personnel has access to devices can also be an example of ways to mitigate this type of attack. Next, we're going to talk about weak points through data protection software and software protected systems. So an example of a potential vulnerability would include poor or no type of encryption for sensitive data, weak passwords, no password protected systems, and outdated software, misconfiguration software. This would be a vulnerability that can be exploited by threat actors that can be politically motivated, socially motivated threat actors, criminally motivated threat actors, as well as business competitors. People can breach systems for various reasons, and usually will use these vulnerabilities to break into systems and infiltrate potential attacks. Another example of a threat could be an internal insider, which can be a disgruntled employee. And this can be characterized as external and internal threats. In there, we have the listed frameworks and standards from NIST. An example of the attack vectors can include system breaches through software. This can include malware attacks, ransom attacks, SQL injections, Java code injections, Python code injections, and this is assessed as a high impact to systems, since this is more than likely to occur because it's so common that attackers try to break into systems using these vulnerabilities. Mitigation factors can include that ensure that all devices are password protected with sign-in ID, strong password, or have some type of key fobs. Obviously, multi-source, multi-factor credentials, multi-factor authentication process is best. So it's also good to use it as a mitigation factor in order to protect systems. There should also be physical monitoring of devices when they're not in use or when they are in use. This could be surveillance as well as live surveillance, as well as keep them physically locked. Computer and mobile devices should be kept in secure offices when they're not in use. Make sure that the policies are in place, that you have that multi-authentication process for password-protected devices, as well as making sure that employees are taught the importance of securing physical devices and not downloading untrusted items, as well as ensuring that they have the password requirements for password-protected systems. Next, we're going to talk about vulnerabilities in softwares. So potential vulnerabilities include little or no technology security software such as antiviruses, anti-Trojan, or anti-software, malware software, outdated applications with no patching or no schedule for any type of updates. Potential threats include threat actors that may be politically motivated, criminals that are trying to just breach into systems, business competitors. Potential threats also include software that is purchased elsewhere can have issues, and they can have potential errors that may be purchased from a third party. This is characterized as an external threat. These are the listed standards and the date when they were last revised. Potential attack vectors include software and operating systems that's where the breaches can occur. The inserting of bugs, worms, viruses within the operating system can create infected files, and it can be used as a path for the rest of the originating computer and other computers where transfers may be filed. The impact here can be high since a breach through a particular system can also cause issues elsewhere as well as other computers. Ways to mitigate these potential vulnerabilities would be to ensure that the organization does have the antivirus, anti-Trojan, and anti-malware software in place, that they are up to date. They should also be checked regularly to ensure that they're working and that there's no patches that need to be conducted. Vulnerability assessment should also be conducted to ensure that there's no additional weak points in type of softwares. And last, additional vulnerabilities can include weak firewalls, too much private information available on websites or available to the public, weak supply chain security measures, untrained employees, as well as potential phishing scams through emails. This can be an external or internal threat. Potential threats can include threat actors, competitors, natural disasters, bonnets, politically turmoil can also motivate attack vectors to breach into systems. Legal issues can rise when conducting communications over the internet if companies do not comply with encrypted regulations. Attack vectors can include telecommunication and human factors. These include email attachments, compromised web pages, online advertisements, emails, and social engineering. Again, the impact of this can be high since it could happen so often, as well as if a successful breach does occur, then it would affect multiple systems and not just particularly one. Mitigation factor could include strong protections and barriers that would protect the company when actually using the internet. So strong connectivity, updated and strong firewalls must be in place, and ensure that websites that are being visited are trusted, as well as also including antivirus and anti-malware software in order to detect any type of potential breaches and stop the breach. So with all these vulnerabilities in place, we should take a look at security architectures. This concept refers to security designs, processes, and frameworks that are in place in order to establish some type of security within the systems. This can occur in multiple ways. One way of doing this would be for access control. So access control is establishing who has specific access to data and their privileges in order to secure data from potential threats, ensuring that systems have multi-source authentication and strong password requirements. This can mitigate potential threats of software cracking passwords from discovering passwords, physical security around devices such as computer rooms, connectivity. This could be physical surveillance or live surveillance of devices, ensuring that software is up to date with what we've previously mentioned before, which is the antivirus, anti-malware, bug detectors, and as well as strong firewall security. And last, ensuring that users are taught how to identify potential social engineering attempts, providing them standards and procedures of how to report suspected threats, and have actionable measures in place in order to stop or mitigate when breaches do occur. Now we're going to take a look at access control. Access control is a security architecture technique that keeps data safe. It provides permission and the ability to enter a given network for the user. application or other resources in a structured manner that limits the accessibility for those who are not authorized to enter. This is important because it separates powers and duties, so no one administrator or one user becomes too powerful to overrun data and use it for malicious purposes in the long run. It serves as a checks and balance between users. It limits permissions to particular users, establishes control, and prevents legitimate users from conducting malicious transactions. Examples of access control can include physical locks, such as boxes or doors, logical, which are electronic keys or passwords, RBAC, those are role-based access control, that the access is determined based on the role of the employee. Mandatory access control or sensitivity levels of the data compared to the user's level access. Attribute-based access are access based on features. Identity-based access control, those are based on who the person is. So these are the different examples of access control that can be implemented. Next, we're going to talk about authentication. The user is given a certain set of privileges on a system, but for them to access the data, they must first confirm their identity. In order to do this, then the user must go through the authentication process, which is the start of the login page. Once the user is identified, and the system identifies them by name, location, and email address associated with it, then at that point, the user is able to get in the system. This is important because it restricts access to unauthorized users, provides access to trusted users, verifies the identity, location, and email address of the particular user. Single factor is a small barrier, but not everybody has access to certain data or systems. Obviously, the authentication process of single factor is not as safe as others, but it still will provide some type of level of restriction for access. Multi or two-factor authentication are safer and company deserve to verify the user's identity. It is difficult for hackers to crack a login that uses a password and requires users to input access codes sent to their phone. So having these multiple ways of confirming somebody's identity is a way to mitigate potential breaches from hackers that are trying to use softwares to crack passwords. Example of authentication can be user ID, password, key cards, PIN numbers, access code, biometrics such as facial recognition and fingerprints, multi-factor authentication, uses two or more methods of the login, and two-factor authentication could be a card and a fingerprint. Next, we're going to talk about authorization. Authorization are access rights that are defined by developing a set of rules for each user. This can define what a user can or cannot do within the company's network, applications, or files. And obviously, this is defined by the particular organization or company. This is important because it provides control of data. It limits privileges. Authorization is defined by the company's needs, role of the user, and special circumstances. Essential to securing data, it grants permission to different entities for different capacities. Examples of a particular authorization could be what the user sees, what they can change or modify. A specific example would be a cashier does not have authorization to view payroll because it's not part of their job requirements. Also, a manager can have authorization to view and edit payroll because they're in charge of hours and it's part of their job description. So kind of identifying the role and the need of the user and restricting that particular authorization. All in all, why is access control, authentication, and authorization important? They're important because it separates the power and capabilities among the individuals. It's important to have because at that point, no one person can have an entire task. It serves as a way for checks and balances. Specifically in information technology, powers are separated under requirements, approval, design, implementation, and dynamics. Each section must provide specific responsibility of what the user can and cannot do. They are all concepts that work together to keep data restricted from unauthorized users and is a key component to keep data safe. These concepts are different, but they work together to achieve that particular goal. Again, the authentication identifies the user based on the matched credentials. Authorization consists of the rules provided permission for the user to enter and what they actually can do once they're actually in the system. These concepts cannot stand alone, and they need one another in order to function. There must be permission for the user to enter. In order to enter, then the user must have the credential. All in all, these are in place in order to restrict access from data from malicious users. Next, we're going to explore weaknesses through people. With security controls in place, there are some factors to consider which still may leave systems vulnerable to particular threats. To start, an example would be users leaving unattended devices such as laptops, computer, or mobile devices, careless employees visiting gaming websites, social media sites, or unsecured web browsers, competitors offers $10,000 to the company's employee to write a book about the data of the company, and the employee actually takes the offer and exposes the secrets. An employee forgets to shred social security numbers or leaves them in an unsecure office. Careless actions of users, lack or little training of employees about proper ways to detect, prevent, or report cyber attacks. And last, users falling for social engineering scams while using the organization's networks and devices. So despite there being some type of security measures in place or mitigating factors, people are still the number one weak point, since they can fail to identify and prevent cyber attacks from occurring. Next, there could also be some weaknesses to technology. This can happen by having outdated software, lack of scheduled software updates. For example, the department forgets to conduct a software update for the desktops in the accounting department, lack of access control and restrictions to data, weak softwares, weak firewalls, and not having or having weak antivirus, anti-malware, or lack of security measures, no live detections or alarms set in place in the event of a breach, and lack of physical surveillance, security monitoring for computer room devices or connectivities. Next, we're going to explore weaknesses through policy. This is a big factor, since policy are the rules and that the organization sets out for the employees and for everybody within the organization to implement, right? So an example would be lack of policy regarding access, use, and handling of technology assets within an organization. So if policies aren't there, or if they're not taught to users, and users don't know that what's defined as proper usage and what is not considered proper usage. Another weakness can include a policy that's written without room for updates or changes. Policies are subject to change and depending on future factors, so policies must be written clear and with the capability to make changes in the future. Another example would be unclear policies, maybe something that's not truly defined, or something that leaves a lot of room for questioning. Policies that are not implemented or enforced by management. lack of policies about password requirements and credential sharing, lack of training about best policy practice, about cybersecurity best practices, no standards or procedures of how to actually report a cyber attack, and last, no action plan or recovery plan in place in the event that an attack does occur. All right, so last, we're going to provide some recommendations. In cybersecurity, there are going to be threats, risks, and vulnerabilities. Organizations must come to an acceptance that continuous efforts of detecting, preventing, and fighting cyber attacks has to occur. The key is being prepared when the organization does face an attack and grow from that experience in order to prevent future attacks. So particular recommendations would be strong and clear, flexible policies in place that address proper cybersecurity best practices and ensure how they will be reinforced. So, like I said, everything starts from the top, making sure the policies are clear and that they are implemented by management and taught to its users. Ensuring that there is a business continuity plan, ensuring there's a disaster recovery plan, auditing, monitoring systems and protecting data, installing security software that will protect and fight off potential cyber attacks, conduct vulnerability assessments, training for users, and ensuring that management is implementing the rules as well. In addition, making sure that there are legal resources and responses available for organizations to make sure that they are in compliance with all policies and laws, federally and state. In addition, access controls such as restricting data only to necessary people, having multi-authentication requirements in place for systems, detection of breaches, real-time and activity blocking, intrusion prevention systems, penetrating systems, ensure that there's tools for threat identifiers such as decoys, firewall, a web-based deception solutions. And last, have artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced endpoint protection, biometrics, and other defense technologies that can assist for cyber crimes. So, for example, having artificial intelligence can be used as a multi-factor authentication verification, and that way it can help prevent breaches through particular systems.